Hello, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving from Bart, Sibrel. I hope you're enjoying the holiday with your family, friends, and good food. And I wanted to showcase over the Thanksgiving holiday a very unique interview I recently did with the other side of the news, Cynthia, Timothy Saunders, and Annette Driscoll. Here is that interview. It's so extensive, I did it in two parts. You're about to see part one, and then on Sunday, around 7 a.m. Central Time, I will upload part two. We discuss not only the moon landing hoax, but also JFK, ESP, and aliens, and how NASA is involved. In fact, I will soon be writing a book about aliens and their potential for showing up in the next couple of years and NASA's involvement in that. In order to do that, I'm going to need to record an audio book. I'm going to be relocating, and the new location, to tell you the truth, has a lot of barking dogs and things, so I'm going to need new microphone, new soundproofing, and things like that. I only do a fundraiser about once a year. And as you know, I was fired by NBC News for working on the moon landing documentary because even though they admitted it was true, they said it embarrassed the station. I've been kicked out of churches. I've lost corporate accounts. So I've lost a lot of money making these movies to pursue the truth. It's also been a bit exhausting emotionally. And as you know from my book, I have risked my life literally exposing this truth. So if you want to show your support, I really need it at this hour. I'm semi-retired and don't have a whole lot of money coming in, and I need to produce this book because it's an upcoming event that may affect a lot of people. Go to the link beneath this video. The first link is my PayPal donate button. You don't need a PayPal account. You can just use the debit card button instead. There's also a link for the book, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, which is in Kindle, print, or audio, and I read it myself. A lot of people enjoy the author reading it, and that's what I want to do with this alien book, and I need a little shot in the arm financially to make that happen. And then the third link is a subscribe star button. I do a weekly podcast that you can subscribe to. So please show your kind support. I really need it more than ever. Please make a donation with the link beneath this video and enjoy this episode with the other side of the news, in which we discuss not only the moon landing hoax, but also JFK, ESP, and aliens. So stay tuned. Please click on the link below, and thank you for showing your thanks for my hard work and risk here on the Thanksgiving holiday.
The Other Side of the News is a place where we investigate, explore, and extrapolate facts in our pursuit to mine a new vein of truth through the mantle of civilization, to gain a better understanding of current affairs and world events.
It's spontaneous commentary.
Our desire is to awaken your imagination with questions that have not been asked, yet need answering.
To gain an improved understanding through the lens of science, medicine, law, and beyond. To obtain compelling answers from fascinating viewpoints.
It's about curiosity. We instigate thought-provoking conversations to incite and refresh your mind,
propelling you to perceive our world in another way.
Propelling us all to perceive our world in a superior way. Together we assume the role of an intellectual lighthouse to warn and protect passing ships from the rocks of censorship, tyranny, and lies.
Until this murky veil inevitably shifts to a higher vibration.
Tune in to balance your view with the other side of the news.
Welcome to the other side of the news. This is Cynthia, together with Timothy Saunders and Annetta Driscoll. We have a wonderful guest tonight, very controversial, Bart Sibrel. Our show is called Eclipse of the Truth. Bart is an award-winning filmmaker, writer, and investigative journalist who has been producing television programs, documentaries, music videos, TV commercials, and stage plays for over 40 years, starting at the age of 18 and hosting his own television show. Sibrel has owned 5 video production companies, been employed by 2 of the 3 major networks, worked as a television news reporter, and produced videos shown on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, TLC, USA, and BET. Sibrel has also appeared as a seasoned actor on stage and screen over 500 times. Articles in Sibrel's films have been published in Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and USA Today. His awards from the American Motion Picture Society include Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Top 10 Director. Welcome to the other side of the news, Bart. Great to have you join us tonight.
Cynthia, after hearing my bio, I'm thinking, wow, with all those credentials, why am I not richer than I am?
Well, oh, goodness. Well, you have certainly been stirring things up. And before I go into your case, let's say, your case on the moon, in all transparency, Bart, I want to share a little bit about the team on this side. I first met Timothy Saunders because I'm on the Enterprise Mission Imaging team, and Timothy joined us several years back. Now, what that means is back in 1982, together with Richard Hoagland, we were investigating the face on Mars and all the footage from the Viking spacecraft. And I sculpted the first face on Mars, which appeared on his book, Monuments of Mars. Since that time, the team has been looking avidly at moon photos and Mars photos. And, you know, it's interesting. I have a lot of questions in my heart. I felt very moved by your documentary of something, you know, happened on the way to the moon and Moon Man. And I had an opposite response to Wild Astronauts. Did I say that right? Astronauts Gone Wild. Astronauts Gone Wild. All right. So before I wanted to mention here, I wanted to actually explore a little bit about why you took this journey. I know it has something to do with truth. That's why we started this show, is because we feel that truth is really important. And I wanted to hear from you, what was your guiding impulse towards taking on this subject matter?
Well, I grew up like everybody else thinking the moon missions were real, and even more so. I don't know how many people out there listening, or yourselves included, had a shrine in their house to the moon landing like I did. I was 4 years old at the time, asleep in bed, but my father was in the Air Force, and he received a VIP package of Apollo 11 prints of them allegedly on the moon, gave them to me, and they were my cherished gift as a 4-year-old. And being in the Air Force, we moved around a lot, and every new bedroom that I got every year and a half had a shrine dedicated, one wall, to all the moon landing pictures. And this went on for 10 years. So from the age of 4 to 14, I saw these pictures 3,650 times, assuming that they were on the moon. And then as a 14-year-old, I was watching a television program that had as a guest a gentleman by the name of William Casey, who worked for NASA as a contractor for Rocketdyne, during the Apollo program development. He had very high security clearance. He confessed he saw a memo written from von Braun to the Pentagon that warned them that the likelihood of them being able to go to the moon on the first attempt with untried 1960s technology was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, meaning they're going to kill the crew on live international television if they try to go. And so a plan was conceived, like having bad cards in poker, to bluff. And so they contrived the fake moon landing. So this idea, fortunately, caught me as an open-minded 14-year-old. And I'm like, oh, never thought of that, right? Unlike today, where I've talked to professors teaching aerospace at major universities who say that even if they saw Buzz Aldrin confess on national TV that the moon missions were fake, they would still think he walked on the moon anyway. You see, this is one of the problems with people being able to perceive the truth about this. It's a religion to them. If a guy who was 10 years old at the time watching it in his living room thinks he knows better than Buzz Aldrin, the guy's mentally ill, even though he's teaching university, which is universal thinking, right? You're not judged in university. You don't get your degree because of your acumen of critical thinking. You get your degree based on memorizing data that you're told is true, and it may or may not be true, and repeating it, right? If they say 2 + 2 is 1,140, all I have to do is memorize 1,140, put it there, 1,140. I memorized it. I get a degree. And so critical thinking is different. And so as a 14-year-old, I went back to this shrine on my bedroom wall, and I had the original prints. NASA has since color corrected them, and that's for a very good reason. If you can get the original prints on eBay or a book from the library from 1969, 1970, the soil in their photographs that's supposed to be on the moon is a caramel brown, because it is caramel brown. It only looks gray to the eye because of the distance and the sunlight on it and the atmosphere and things like that. The Chinese probes, which I tend to lean toward thinking are genuine, the soil is caramel brown. And then the backdrops in these original pictures, the background soil is grayish blue. So you can see pretty easily in a horizontal line left to right where the brown stops and the gray begins in a straight line. And so it's like, oh, that's a fake backdrop. And now they color corrected it so that the soil is grayish blue also, which is pretty interesting, which they wouldn't have to do if the moon missions were real. And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind that, oh, maybe they were fake. I don't know. Well, fast forward another 10 years from that point in the story as a 14-year-old. At 24, I'd become a professional filmmaker. I was already producing movies, TV commercials, music videos, documentaries. And of course, my job as a filmmaker is to make fake scenes look real. And so I can tell you for 100% certainty that the moon missions were 100% falsified. For example, if you go to Sibrel.com, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com, you can see a picture right there on the home page of what it looks like when things are lit with natural sunlight. I showed 2 telephone poles. They're about 5 feet apart, and their shadows go the same direction, and they never intersect. Despite the landscape change, despite even a 90-degree angle of a building in front of them, the shadows still go the same direction and never intersect, never come close to intersecting. And then I show a picture that's allegedly taken from the last mission to the moon, Apollo 17, from objects 5 feet apart, and the shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees. That cannot be duplicated in sunlight, which means it was taken with electrical light, which means they're on Earth.
Right.
And so when I realized this, as serendipity would have it, I was editing as a filmmaker that week for the man who had produced the program I saw 10 years earlier as a 14-year-old. with William Casey on it. Of course, I didn't remember his name, and I'm like, who was the guy who, was on that show? He puts me in touch with the production office in San Francisco, and they tell me the gentleman's name. I track him down. I talk to him over the phone, and being a filmmaker, he suggests that I make a movie about it. Well, I didn't immediately say yes or no. I said, well, let me think about it. So I knew the shadows intersected. I knew that the Soviets had launched the first satellite, the first animal, the first man, the first woman, the first spacewalk, the first crew of 3, the first of 2 spacecrafts at the same time. For every 10 hours the U.S. spent in space, they spent 50 hours. And they never once went to the moon with humans. And somehow the U.S., being 500% behind, leaped this great leap forward that can't be duplicated to this day. And then I found out that 2 of the 3 astronauts on the maiden most famous voyage refused to give interviews unless the President of the United States personally asked them to. Then I find out the administrator of NASA resigned right before he can boast, I'm in charge of going to the moon, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then, of course, there's the shadows intersecting, the fact that they can't do it today. And I'm thinking, something doesn't smell right about this. And I realized I kind of have this relentless, never give up personality. And then I also kind of have an acumen for puzzles. I even drew mazes as a 4th grader. Mm-hmm. And so I figured if anyone could discover whether the moon missions were real or not, it would be me. And then I realized if they really did fake the moon landing, and I start investigating it, that could be hazardous to my health. So I turned down the project. I said, look, I'm a liar. Everybody's a liar. I'm not going to risk my life for what Nixon did, in 1969. No, thank you. 5 years go by. I start developing a conviction that the world is in a spiritual battle. And it is.
There you go.
I mean, the executive producer of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon used to be an atheist until he started dissecting 9/11. And he says, that is pure evil. And if there's that evil on one end, there has to be good on the other. Now, you can call it God, a supreme being, or whatever. But the fact is, we're in the middle of a war between good and evil. And if mankind's greatest accomplishment is putting a man on the moon, and it's a lie, that is highly spiritually significant. So after 5 years, I started thinking about that. I realized I'm going to die anyway. And I realized if they faked the moon landing, that's actually more profound historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? The faking of the moon landing, if that's true, that's so much more significant than if they, really went. And when you discover that is the case, wow. It's like I knew the earth was fallen and messed up, but to that degree. So as soon as I changed my mind 5 years later, I called up Bill, and as serendipity would have it, I meet a millionaire who builds rockets for NASA, who knows the moon missions are fake. He gave me $1 million.
All of them?
Yes, all of them. Because the last mission, Apollo 17, is the one that has the most 90-degree intersecting shadows of all the missions, right? And they all had identical equipment, right? So if one Volkswagen Bug can't go 500 miles an hour, none of them can. And seeing how it's identical equipment, if the first mission can't go to the moon, then none of them could. And if the shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees in the last mission, it means they never went. And why bother, right? They already got away with faking it. You make a lot more money, and it's a lot easier and a lot less risky to just keep pretending it, especially after you already got away with it. So this ends up being the case, and so we produced A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which took 7 years to make. And just to edit the 45-minute film, I spent about 4,000 hours, which is 40 hours a week for 2 years just to edit the movie. And of course, we spent a lot of money on research. And lo and behold, halfway, 3.5 years into the 7-year project, I pop in a videotape, and on the screen it says, "Do not show to the public." And I'm like, oh, this should be good. As I normally do as an editor, hit fast forward, and instead of seeing, a bunch of edits back to back, which is everything from NASA was pre-edited. They sent me 20 tapes, and it's the same thing over and over again. Very little footage of the mission. In fact, from the first mission, there's only about maybe 20 pictures of an astronaut on the surface of the moon, and 0 of Neil Armstrong. He didn't want his picture taken. Now, they may boast there's thousands of pictures regarding Apollo, but most of them are on the ground, of the Earth, of the sky, inside the spacecraft. When it comes to on the moon with people, there's a scarcity of pictures, including 0 of Neil Armstrong. Pretty amazing, isn't it? He didn't want the legal liability. So I hit fast forward and I see the same shot. It's like a little blue ball Earth with black around it, wiggling around, at high speed, and it's going on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is unedited footage. The only unedited footage I've found so far. So I take it back to the beginning. I hit play, and of course this is shown at Sibrel.com on the homepage, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. And I hear NASA say, hey, the TV picture looks great. Then there's a 4-second delay, and then I hear a third party that's not NASA, not the astronauts, and with a different audio EQ, like not through a walkie-talkie sound, crystal clear. And the voice says, talk, after a 4-second delay.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
You see, the shot is them pretending to be halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. So if he answers the question right away, that gives away that he's close to the Earth because of the difference of light speed and radio wave speed. They calculated 2 seconds out to halfway to the moon and 2 seconds back. And so they told him not to talk until 4 seconds go by. And I'm like, oh, this is the CIA. And then when the lights come up, you see it's a 1-foot model of the Earth, and the Earth is outside the window when they just claimed they were halfway to the moon when they're obviously still in Earth orbit. And it dawns on me. I mean, you have to understand this. I had people who worked at NASA tell me it was fake, and I still didn't make a decision. I said, well, I need proof. And then, lo and behold, 3.5 years into the project, I found proof. And I'm just shocked. And I call up Bill Casing, and I'm frantic. I'm like, Bill, they really didn't go to the moon. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. I said, no, you don't understand. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And it just brought tears to my eyes. Mm-hmm. Wow, how sad is this? How sad is mankind? How sad is the United States of America? And so that's kind of my backstory on it. And then what it was 20 years later, it looks like something like that, I released Moon Man, which is on audio, which I read myself, Kindle or print, which is the behind-the-scenes story. There was a lot of information I did not put in the movie, including the testimony of murdered Apollo astronauts' family members who told me they were murdered by the CIA because of them being whistleblowers about the Apollo program. So they said they're pursuing their own legal things and not to interfere. And now that they're deceased, I have that in the book. And also a couple of chapters, including a funny thing happened on the way to CNN and a funny thing happened on the way to church. The funny thing happened on the way to CNN is when I found this footage. You got to understand, I had proof in my house that they didn't go to the moon. I showed it to the news director at NBC News, right? I worked at NBC News. He fainted practically. He says, "Oh my gosh, this proves they didn't go to the moon." I said, "Yeah, what do we do?" He says, "I can't air this. It'll cause a civil war against the federal government. I'm not going to go down in history as the man who caused the next civil war." He admitted it was the truth. He admitted it proved the federal government faked the moon landing, and he says it's so controversial and so upsetting to the public who prayed for them and waved their flag that it will cause civil unrest, and he refused to broadcast it, right? And then later that day, phone calls are interrupted. I frantically run to CNN in the middle of the night to get the tape to someone at CNN. I'm literally surrounded by government agents in a back alley of CNN. They taped the tape. They illegally arrested me. They drugged me with truth serum, put me in the back of a van that's pitch black, and started interrogating me about where's the tape and the original and blah, blah, blah. I escaped their custody, okay? I make my way back to Nashville, where I lived at the time, and I said, I got him. I got truth serum in me. So I pee in a cup. I give it to a friend to put in a lab in his name, hoping I can outwit the CIA. And a few days go by, and I meet with him, and I say, well, what's the lab results? And he says, well, there was a problem at the lab. And I'm like, oh, what problem? He said, well, they had a break-in over the weekend. And I'm like, so what? He said, well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample. So all of this is in the book, too, at Sibrel.com. Not only the behind-the-scenes homicide of Apollo astronauts by the CIA, not my testimony, the testimony of the dead people's relatives. And
ruthless like 911.
Yeah, I agree with you, by the way, your opening comment about Astronauts Gone Wild. It's hard for me to watch it, and I made it. The most interesting thing in there, really, is when I show this fake footage to an Apollo astronaut. He turns beet red, gets violent, kicks me, says, where did you get this? And throws me out of his house. And of course, in all that commotion, I accidentally left a high-quality microphone that was wireless on him. So when my camera person is so, messed up because never been part of someone being assaulted before, they forgot to hit stop recording on the camera. So when the camera's in the back seat of the rental car in the lying astronaut's driveway, and he's in his house with the door closed talking to his son, we're actually recording their private audio on the videotape in the back seat of the rental car. And about 3 months afterwards, the secretary of the film calls me up frantically saying, Bart, do you know what they're talking about in their house before you turn and got your expensive microphone? I'm like, I don't know what. She says, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. She says, no, Bart, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. She says, Bart, you're not listening. They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
Now, first of all, why is an Apollo astronaut so buddy-buddy with the CIA if the moon landings are real? And secondly, if they are real, and I'm some silly person who thinks it was done in a TV studio, why would the CIA or anybody care, right? So I've rambled on. That's my opening statement, and back to you.
Right. Well, wow. There's a lot that I want to key off of there, where to start. And we're almost at break time. I heard that footage and I wondered, as I understand it was the son who said that. And I was wondering, could he have just been making a joke, or could he have just been, ribbing his dad like people, like sons do?
No, that's not the case at all. He was genuinely angry at me.
Uh-huh.
And so, he and his dad have talked a lot about, what's really going on in the government Apollo program or whatever. So obviously, previously, the father told the son he has contacts at the CIA, and maybe he's killed other people before. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know
what their conversations were,
Mm-hmm.
but he was very serious. I was there.
So I just want to make one comment before we go to break here, is that like I said, I was very moved by the two documentaries, but when I saw Astronauts Gone Wild, out of respect, and I do respect you, I have to say that I felt you weren't asking questions, you were just accusing them. And had it been me, even if I hadn't done anything, I probably would have told you the same thing they said. The approach was you were already condemning them. For me, it skewed the presentation. I could imagine my own dad.
If I may say, that's a mistake on your part, because with shadows intersecting at 90 degrees.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm not questioning that.
I'm just hear my logic first, okay? With shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, which can't be duplicated in sunlight, which means the pictures are fake, which means they're on Earth, with classified footage of the CIA telling them to fake a radio delay, right? And a 1-foot model of the Earth being used to fake being halfway to the moon, meaning they can't go halfway, means with 100% certainty and 0% doubt, they did fake the moon landing. So when I go up to these people to confront them with a crime that they did, which is accessory to multiple murders, these are not innocent people that I am accusing wrongly. That's the attitude that you have. What I have
I'm not saying they were innocent. I'm just saying
people who have absolutely guilty traitors to America, embezzling billions of dollars, complicit and murdering their fellow citizens. It's those people I'm addressing that way. Now,
wait, let's catch that on the other side of the break, because this is a big topic and I know the others want to jump in. So you're listening to The Other Side of the News. Our guest tonight is Bart Sibrel from Sibrel.com. And the show is called Eclipse of the Truth, and we shall return. Welcome back to The Other Side of the News. This is Cynthia, together with Timothy Saunders and Annetta Driscoll. Our unusual and amazing guest tonight is Bart Sibrel, and he was just in the middle of a cliffhanger. So I want to give you a chance, Bart, to finish your thought.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. You're very gracious. And I do believe in God, and I do believe that, right or wrong. And I pray practically every day to be a better person. If Jesus is the Messiah, he was loving, he forgave adultery, he forgave sin with rare exception. And the exception was when they were leaders. When they were leaders, he called them whitewashed tombs. He called them sons of the devil and not sons of Abraham.
But he also said judgment is God's judgment.
Right, but the point is it spiritual, which was your point? It's a valid point, or at least question. Are these astronauts world leaders enough, which I believe they are, to be rebuked openly that way? At the time, I believe that, but I have to be honest, I could be wrong. Maybe it would have been more tactful, more polite, more Jesus-like to have treated them with kid gloves. But maybe I was right, calling them sons of the devil of sorts and whitewashed tombs. You see, with that attitude, because they are. For example, last week or the week before, I did Glenn Beck interview. Now, Glenn Beck, I presume, is a long advocate of bringing down the quote deep state, and then he has on his program, right, the one surviving Apollo astronaut that boasts he's a Christian, Charles Duke. Okay, he goes around saying he's a Christian. He goes on Glenn Beck's show saying the moon landings are real when they're not, and obviously he's not a Christian if he's a liar. And then Glenn Beck just praises him and praises him and praises him, kisses his feet, and criticizes me for pointing out the truth to him and having on, people who contributed to the murder of people, the murder of 3 astronauts and other people. That by faking the moon landing willingly, by not protesting, by not telling the truth about it to this day, they are complicit in the deaths of many honorable people. The guy is a scoundrel. And Glenn Beck thinks, he's a hero. And it's just sad that that is the case. The problem is whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead, okay? Even though the dead man's nephew says the CIA did it, and I figure he knows better than I do, so the CIA did it. If you got 3,000 architects and engineers say it's mechanically impossible for a pinhole airplane to go through a skyscraper that's a steel grid and to cause its collapse, I believe him. I mean, all you have to do is look at Oklahoma City bombing photograph. Half the building is blown away. The thing's still rock solid, right? So a pinhole going in and out, and 3,000 architects and engineers signed an affidavit risking their reputations and livelihoods, right? So I take their word for it. But still, whoever did it, and it's probably people in the corrupt federal government did it, all those people are dead. This is different. This is a positive lie. This is giving candy to a spoiled child. And imagine, in America, there's the Super Bowl. And imagine there's an international Super Bowl and America wins. And they've been boasting for 54 years, America won the international Super Bowl. And then you tell them, even though it's the truth, they cheated. They bribed the referee, they changed the score, and they put drugs in the opponent's Gatorade. People are mad at you for defaming the glorious, win of their home team. That's what the Super Bowl is. It's taking away this sweet, sweet candy of the one great thing about corrupt America and giving them a plate of manure instead. But the fact is, they need to wake up and smell the manure. There will never be a great awakening if they know the truth about everything else, but think that mankind's greatest accomplishment, the U.S.'s greatest accomplishment, is real, when it's the epitome of the corruption, lying, and arrogance of our leaders. And so the news director was onto something. He didn't say the exposure of 9/11 would cause civil unrest. He didn't say showing who shot JFK would show civil unrest. He said revealing the fact that the moon missions were fake, which he agreed they were fake. Director of NBC News. He said that will cause civil unrest. It's different. They prayed for them. They waved their flag. They cheered. They cried. They've been boasting about it for 54 years. They put it on coins. They put it on stamps. They have it in the Smithsonian Institution. And for that to become a lie, and knowingly, it will bring down the federal government, which is a good thing if they're that corrupt, right? It's like the NBC News director was really saying, if we show the public how corrupt the federal government is, it'll bring down the corrupt federal government. Well, I guess that's what's supposed to happen. Exactly. So when you have people like Glenn Beck being such a tool of the deep state and clueless about it, it's just sad. And it proves that you can be sincere and be sincerely wrong, And so the definition of pride is simply the unwillingness to be wrong. And humility is the willingness to be wrong. I was willing to be wrong. I'm willing to be wrong to this day. In fact, it's good to be wrong. Number one, you're not walking around in error, right? That's a blessing, right? You don't want to keep taking a medicine for an illness and it actually makes it worse. You want to know that, don't you? Don't you want to be enlightened about that? Or would you rather be right and wrong, right? And
right and dead.
Exactly. You're learning something new. You see? So for whatever reason, and it's American culture is pride. I go to other countries. I say, please give me a glass of water. They bring me orange juice. I go to the airport when I return to America in Chicago, and I say, can I have a glass of water? The bartender rolls his eyes. Oh, no tip from you. Hands me the squirt gun, do it yourself. And then when I go back to get a refill with the squirt gun, he's mad at me for touching the squirt gun, which he handed to me to use. I mean, it's just a complete arrogance. When I travel in a foreign country, people are like, well, where are you from? Where are you from? Are you from Australia? Are you from England? And I say, well, let me give you a clue. Get out of my way. Oh, American. you know? And so I don't know. I don't know if the truth is going to come out. I pray that it will. I hope that it will. I mean, just imagine everybody. Right now, all of our phones are ringing, emails are going crazy. People are texting us now, and they say, turn on your TV. It's one of the astronauts confessing on national TV it was fake. It's the CIA admitting the moon missions were fake, and it becomes public knowledge that the moon missions are fake, publicly acknowledged, absolute fact. What would that be like? It would be like the whole country having a cold glass of water thrown in their face. They wake up, they realize they have been sleepwalking their whole life, and they look down and they're 1 foot away from a cliff. It would be a blessed, great thing. Now, it may cause the dollar to collapse. It may cause the stock market to collapse, you see?
Well, we think the dollar's going to
reputation of
collapse
America,
anyway.
but if you have gangrene on your arm, if you don't cut it off, you're going to die. Better to lose an arm than your life. Better to admit and expose this corruption than for it to kill everybody, which eventually it will. It's inevitable.
Well, we are all about exposing the corruption. That's why we started The Other Side of the News, was to actually offer that, The Other Side of the News. And thank you for sharing that. I want to give the other hosts, Annetta, if you'd like to come in. I know they're bursting with questions.
Yes, of course. Hi, Bart. This is Annetta.
Hi.
Hi. I actually was not on the same page as Cynthia and Timothy, as far as I was not on the, I don't know what you called it, what'd you call that, Cynthia, the group, the Mars people, the
Enterprise Mission Imaging Team.
The Enterprise Mission Imaging Team. Yes, I was not part of that. I am a straight up conspiracy analyst, and I love my hat, my special hat. So I look at this, and I don't have the same view of NASA. Now, I'm not speaking for Timothy. I've had these discussions with Cynthia, and my view is that NASA was created and has always been a super corrupt organization. Its roots were evil. They were born that way. There's a lot of ideas around even the name itself. You take out the T. Everything is countdown minus T, which is really interesting. Symbolically, it has a serpent in the logo. There's some very nefarious stuff around it. I'll just say that. Whether we can prove that or not, that's another thing. But certainly you can look at it and see some of that. So my question is about NASA. It's clearly a gigantic, monstrous laundry machine for money, with an annual budget of $27.4 billion. That's with a B, $1 billion a year annually. That's this year's budget. $27.4 billion is a little hard to visualize, at least for me. So if you think about 27.4 million, that's a lot of money. I mean, 27.4 million is a lot of money, but if you multiply that times 1,000, so 27.4 million times 1,000, that's the budget. I mean, we have these astronomical budgets for all kinds of crap in this country because, it's not going where they say it is on almost any program you talk about. But NASA is particularly egregious with this. So they have this enormous budget, and then they, as far as I can tell, produce cream of nothing, and then they propagandize like crazy, and then they also clearly are funding some black projects. But I think it's worse than that. And I am of the thought. I mean, I am very much a person, good versus evil. And oh, by the way, about the leadership, yes, it does say in the Bible that the shepherds will be judged differently than the sheep. And the shepherds are held to a higher standard. So I would be very much on the side of these people that have intentionally misled and been accessories to these crimes, if not actively involved in the crimes. That's where I would come at that from. But back to the budget part, that's just all my opinion. Back to the budget part, like what do you think is really going on there? Why do you think it was formed, and what do you think is happening, and what has happened, and what do you think is happening now with that? That's a loaded question. Sorry. But
I've heard that about the NASA in Hebrew means Satan, and then I just realized listening to you, you can't say NASA without saying ass. But anyway, the first military source who told me before I accepted it that the moon missions were falsified said it's all about the money. And right as I'm thinking laundering money, the purpose of NASA, you say it. And that's definitely the case. Back in the early days of Nashville, where I lived, I kept driving by year after year this place that was open at like 4 o'clock in the morning called Columbo's Hot Chicken. And I was a big Columbo TV program fan. So finally one day, I go by like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they only have like 4 tables. And this is like, 30 years ago, a piece of chicken was like $5 for one piece. And then there's a woman sitting behind a telephone that has like 20 line telephone, taking phone call after phone call, at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so obviously it was a front for gambling or whatever. And that's what this is. I just read an email or a news bulletin 1 or 2 days ago that the federal government, according to their own, public disclosure websites, has spent over $3 trillion on COVID response. $3 trillion. I only got 2,000 of that. I don't know about you. $3 trillion.
I got cream of nothing, zero.
$3 trillion on COVID response. And when I realized that, it's like, one of the main purposes, it could have multiple purposes: to interfere with the election, to lower the population by getting people to trick into the shot or whatever. But it could just be money laundering, And so where did that money go? So that means that the $3 trillion were used for something else. Now, if the event going on over the last 3 years is non-existent, according to a former vice president of the company that sells the medicine, and if according to him the medicine is not good for you, and if according to him, in his own horror, the purpose is to trick people into taking the medicine to achieve the goal of there being fewer people on the earth, which is the whole stated goal of the people who are running the show out of their own mouth, I take it to the next step, which is, well, why are they doing it now? Why are they so urgent to do it now? Now, if you listen to Eisenhower's infamous military-industrial complex speech, which was January 19th, 1961, the guy was president for 8 years. He was a general. And he was so afraid of the people he was criticizing, he never said anything about it for 8 years. And then as he's going out the door, knowing he can get away with it and not get shot, he warns that their deep state is taking over and impending true democracy. Then the next guy comes along, tries to do something about it, and he does get a bullet. Well, similarly, Janet Napolitano, Homeland Security Director, said something interesting the day she resigned. She said that a natural disaster is coming that has never happened in the history of America, and that her successor was going to need a big bottle of Tylenol to deal with it. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Well, there's 3 clues here. What is coming, what they're secretly preparing for, is a natural disaster. And secondly, it's a natural disaster that has never happened in the 248 years of America. And third hidden clue, it's a natural disaster that somehow you could know about years in advance. Well, America has had volcanoes and earthquakes and hurricanes and tidal waves and so forth and so on, and you can't predict those years in advance. But something from outer space, like a comet, asteroid, or rogue planet, you can read about this at Sibrel.com in one of the articles featured. Those you can calculate years in advance because of geometry. Those are natural disasters. Those have never happened in the history of America before, you see? So if that money, the $3 trillion, is being allocated for secret reasons, it could be to prepare for that event. And the whole strategy to lower the number of people on the earth could be to prepare for that event because they consider them that they're going to die anyway, and it's a controlled burn, lowering the number of people on the earth in advance of that so that it'll be less of a shock when it happens. So yes, it's a front. This is just our country. I mean, I don't understand how William Benny, who works for the NSA for 30 years at upper management, can go on national news and say, oh, by the way, we spy on the private cell phone conversations of Supreme Court justices to get financial and sexual impropriety on them so we can blackmail them to vote the way we tell them. No one contradicts him, and yet there's no investigation by the Justice Department or FBI. I mean, how can that be? This is how that's
we
messed
can
up
tell
our
you how
country.
that is. Yeah, I mean, I think right now what we're going through is, I personally believe that this is the word I use is a movie, that we're interactively participating in this, that they're being shown, the people that are not awake, that have not been paying attention, are being shown a ridiculous, absolutely absurd script showing you how corrupt these things are. They are very corrupt. I mean, some of us have known for a very long time. Some are just waking up. Some are still dead ass asleep. You know, it's not to say one way or the other. I mean, I think everyone's on their own journey and at the place they're supposed to be. I believe we all come in with an idea. You know, we come in with some people say soul contract. I don't really like that term, but you know, it's pretty descriptive. But yeah, we're in that place where this is all getting revealed. And by the way, I think that the whole moon thing is going to be part of disclosure. And I think we're just starting to see a lot of disclosure. I mean, it's very interesting what's happening right now. For example, you know, these court documents that just came through. 2 incidents in this past week where you see, well, it wasn't this, it was a week before last, I think. Bart is interviewing President Trump, and he's talking about RFK Jr., but he says John F., you know, he says JFK Jr., and Brett Barr is correcting him, and Trump refuses to correct it. Then later on in the week, we find out that there's documents filed and that they have, inside the document, it's the plaintiff is RFK Jr., but when you open up the document and you look, I think it's the first or second paragraph, I had to go back and look at it, it's JFK Jr. So these kinds of things they're prepping us. So you know they always do that. I mean, the evil side has always used, you know, they've always used these different methods to soften us up to these ideas. You know, we have this predictive programming all the time, and they've done that with the moon, big time.
And there you have it, the end of part 1 of my interview with the other side of the news. We've got many more topics to talk about, not only the moon landing fraud, but JFK, ESP, and aliens and how they pertain to NASA. And there's a link beneath this video. Once a year I do a fundraiser, and I need your support more than ever. I need to buy new audio equipment, soundproofing, microphone. I'm relocating, and I need a shot in the arm to record that audiobook about the aliens and NASA's involvement of something that may come down the pike in a couple of years. So please show your true support and your true thanks for all the work that I've done, all the stress that I've gone through to help me support my work and the next book by clicking on the link below. You don't need a PayPal account to make a donation. You can use your debit card. Then there's also a link to my book, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List. If you don't have it, it's available in print, Kindle, and audio, which I read myself. And the third link is for a weekly podcast I do that you can subscribe to. That's about the alternative media. So thank you so much for showing your thanks during this Thanksgiving by clicking on the link below. The next episode will be available on Sunday.